The galaxy was old. Civilizations had risen, fallen, and vanished into stardust long before Earth's sun had even flickered its first light. The great empires of the stars considered themselves eternal, their rule unshakable, their knowledge absolute. They mapped the stars, bent energy to their will, and believed that nothing truly new could surprise them anymore. And then, the signal arrived. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't wrapped in the precise mathematics that the elder races used for communication. It wasn't even cautious as most fledgling species were when they first poked their heads into the void. No, this transmission came loud, raw and messy, full of strange music, chaotic speech, and an almost arrogant sense of confidence. The translation algorithm stuttered, confused by slang and tone, but the message became clear enough. This is humanity. We're here, and we're not afraid of you. The council chambers of half a dozen empires fell into stunned silence. Not afraid? Every species in history had approached the stars with trembling hands and careful words. Fear was natural. Fear was wise. Fear kept young species alive long enough to avoid extinction. But these humans, they broadcast a message dripping with defiance, as if the galaxy itself had been waiting for their arrival. Reports flooded in from the outposts at the edge of civilized space. A cluster of primitive ships had jumped farther than any species at their stage of development should have been able to. Crude designs, patched metal, engines that should have torn themselves apart under the stress. And yet they worked. Somehow impossibly they worked. The ships carried humans, fragile creatures by galactic standards. Thin skin, soft organs, vulnerable to radiation, weak compared to the armored races. But what unsettled the council more than their biology was their behavior. Where other species approached the unknown with calculation, humans plunged into it with reckless curiosity. Where most would beg permission before setting foot on alien soil, humans simply landed and said, "What's up?" One observer from the Thrin Collective described it best. They act as if the universe belongs to them already. The Council of Elders gathered in secrecy, debating this anomaly. Some argued that the humans were harmless, that arrogance would be their undoing. Others warned that arrogance combined with adaptability was the most dangerous weapon of all. The evidence kept building. Reports from frontier colonies showed humans surviving in conditions other species had written off as uninhabitable. Toxic worlds, violent weather, radiation storms, none of it stopped them. They didn't merely endure, they thrived, and then came the recordings. Alien scouts had intercepted human soldiers during a skirmish with mercenaries. Outnumbered, outgunned, their technology inferior. Yet they laughed in the middle of battle. They charged forward with a fearlessness that bordered on insanity. One phrase echoed again and again, captured in the recordings, burned into the data cores of every intelligence agency in the galaxy. Humans don't give a f***ing. At first, the phrase baffled translators. Over time, it became infamous, an unshakable motto, a warning, a promise. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt something it thought it had forgotten. Not fear of extinction, not fear of war, but fear of the unknown. Humanity was coming, and they weren't playing by anyone else's rules. The elder species had always believed the universe rewarded caution, patience, and order. Now staring at this reckless new arrival, they began to wonder, had they been wrong all along? Because if the humans truly didn't care about odds, traditions, or even death itself, then the galaxy was about to change forever. The Galactic Council had protocols for everything. First contact with a new species was supposed to be delicate, ritualistic, a carefully orchestrated dance of language, courtesy, and restraint. Dozens of civilizations had followed this script before, each nervous, each eager to impress their elders, each bending over backward to prove they weren't a threat. And then came the humans. The Council dispatched emissaries from 3 respected species, the Cathari, the Yuln, and the Varn Collective. Their ships gleamed with polished steel and embroidered banners. Their voices carried centuries of practice in diplomacy. To them, the encounter was history in the making. The day they welcomed another child into the galactic family. The humans, however, saw it differently. When the alien envoys opened their channels with greetings layered in courtesy and ritual, the humans responded with what the translators rendered as, "Hey there. Who the hell are you guys?" Confusion rippled through the alien ranks. Perhaps it was a translation error. Perhaps their systems had failed to capture the subtleties of this crude language. The Yuln representative tried again, offering a poetic recitation of peace and prosperity that had opened every first contact in living memory. The humans interrupted halfway through. "Yeah, that's great and all, but can you get to the point? We've got things to do." Shock, outrage. The emissaries exchanged frantic signals behind muted channels. This was not how it was supposed to go. No species had ever dared interrupt the Yuln ceremonial greeting. It was a tradition older than humanity's entire written history. Yet here were these fragile creatures, smiling, casual, utterly indifferent to galactic decorum. The Cathari diplomat tried a different tactic, reminding the humans of the Council's authority. He spoke of the wisdom of order, the stability of hierarchy, the necessity of following the rules that had preserved peace among the stars. The humans laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an apologetic chuckle. A full-bodied, unrestrained laugh. "Rules? We've only just arrived and you're already telling us what we can't do. Nah, we'll figure things out our own way." The words echoed across every listening post, every relay station, every intelligence bureau tuned into the exchange. Our own way. A declaration of independence, a refusal to submit, spoken so casually it was as if they didn't even recognize the weight of what they were saying. The Varn collective nearly broke off the meeting then and there. To them, humans weren't just rude. They were dangerous. No respect for authority, no fear of tradition, no hesitation in mocking customs that entire empires lived by. And yet, something strange happened. Among the lower ranks of alien soldiers and observers, whispers began to spread. The humans didn't bow. They didn't stutter or tremble. They looked the most ancient and powerful civilizations in the galaxy in the eye and treated them like equals. For those who had lived under the boot of the Council's hierarchy for generations, that kind of defiance wasn't terrifying, it was inspiring. But inspiration was not what the Council wanted. Within days, secret debates tore through the chambers of power. Should humanity be forced into submission before their attitude spread? Should they be isolated, silenced, perhaps even eliminated before their reckless behavior ignited chaos? The Council had no clear answer. All they knew was that their carefully controlled dance of diplomacy had been shattered. Humanity had torn through the stage, kicked over the orchestra, and declared the show theirs now. And the worst part? They didn't even seem to realize the chaos they had unleashed. Because to the humans, it wasn't rebellion. It wasn't defiance. It was simply normal. The galaxy had encountered countless new civilizations before, but this was the first time it realized humanity wasn't just another child joining the family. Humanity was a storm, and storms didn't ask permission before they arrived. The Council of Elders had a problem. Every species before had bent under their authority. Some had resisted, some had protested, but all had eventually fallen into line. It was how the galaxy worked. The strong guided the weak, the cautious disciplined the reckless, and tradition kept chaos from spreading. But humanity wasn't playing the game. The Council feared that if left unchecked, humanity's attitude might spread like wildfire. Already murmurs among the lower castes of alien societies were turning into dangerous questions. Why do we obey the Council? Why can't we stand like the humans? So the decision was made. Humanity had to be humbled, not destroyed, at least not yet. That would be too extreme, too obvious. Instead, they would be tested, pushed into impossible scenarios where their arrogance would crumble, where they would either submit to guidance or vanish into history as another failed species. The first test was environmental. A delegation offered humanity assistance in colonizing a hazardous world. Its atmosphere was toxic, its gravity heavier than Earth's, its weather violent enough to tear ships apart. The Council expected the humans to beg for help, to admit their limits. Instead, they landed within a week. Reports soon emerged. Humans building shelters from scrap metal, wearing improvised gear, laughing as storms ripped across the landscape. One observer noted in disbelief, "They treat survival like a game." The Council doubled its efforts. The second test was psychological. A controlled scenario was arranged in which humans were subjected to prolonged isolation, sensory overload, and engineered fear. Other species had broken under such conditions, shattered minds, despair, madness. It was a well-documented vulnerability of the young, But the humans didn't break, they sang songs. They told stories. They carved graffiti into the walls of their confinement chambers, crude jokes mocking their captors, daring them to try harder. When one was released after a full cycle, the first words he spoke were, "That all you got?" The council was rattled but still not convinced. The third test was combat. A squad of humans was pitted against a far larger, better-equipped alien force in what was supposed to be a controlled exercise. The expectation was that they would retreat, negotiate, or collapse under overwhelming firepower. Instead, the humans advanced, not with precision, not with careful strategy, but with reckless, chaotic fury. They improvised weapons, turned the terrain into traps, and pressed forward with a relentless determination that unnerved even seasoned veterans. Outnumbered 5-1, they still fought as if they had already won. When the exercise ended, observers replayed the recordings again and again. The humans hadn't just survived. They'd enjoyed themselves. Laughter echoed through the comms as they fought. Banter filled the silence where fear should have been. They joked about dying, about odds, about pain. Other species saw battle as a grim necessity. To humans, it was just another challenge, one they refused to face with silence. The council chambers grew tense. For the first time, the elders saw something they had not anticipated. It wasn't that humans lacked fear, it was that they embraced it. They danced with it, mocked it, twisted it into fuel. Every test meant to humble them only strengthened their legend. And across the galaxy, whispers spread. The phrase repeated on every world, in every language, in every frightened report filed by shaken officers. Humans don't give a f***. The council had hoped to break them. Instead, they had proven to the galaxy that humanity had no limits anyone could understand. The storm was growing. And storms, once unleashed, could not be controlled. The Galactic Council had survived countless disputes. Empires had risen and fallen. Species had clashed over borders, ideologies, and resources. But diplomacy had always been the shield that held the galaxy together. Every culture respected the dance of negotiation, the rituals of hierarchy, the endless ceremonies that ensured no one lost face, and then the humans arrived and shattered it all. At first, alien diplomats thought humanity's bluntness was ignorance. Surely once they were taught the sacred traditions, they would adapt. Surely once they saw the weight of galactic history, they would bow their heads and play along. They were wrong. In the grand chamber of the council, beneath banners thousands of years old, the humans showed up wearing patched uniforms, unpolished boots, and wide grins. The Yuln opened the session with an address that took 37 minutes, praising the legacy of interstellar cooperation. When he finally finished, one of the human representatives simply clapped his hands and said, "Cool story. So what's on the agenda?" The chamber erupted in scandalized murmurs. Some species hissed in outrage, others stared in disbelief. The humans didn't even notice. They were already leaning back, whispering jokes to each other. The Cathari delegation tried to remind them of the importance of ceremony. The humans shrugged. "Look, we're not here to waste time. You've got problems, we've got problems. Let's figure out solutions and cut the fluff." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the chamber. No one spoke so directly in council meetings. It was sacrilege. It was madness, and yet, it was refreshing. Behind the scenes, cracks began to form. The younger races, long forced to endure endless rituals that kept them subservient, whispered among themselves, "Why can't we speak like that? Why can't we demand answers instead of bowing?" For the first time in living memory, the council's authority didn't feel eternal. It felt fragile. The elders tried to suppress the growing unrest. They accused humanity of barbarism, of disrespect, of ignorance. But the humans weren't insulted. They laughed. One delegate even raised a glass of contraband liquor during a council dinner and toasted, "To the galaxy's first real conversation." The scandal was immediate. The impact was unstoppable. Cultural clashes erupted across star systems. Alien merchants began adopting human slang, using it to mock their superiors. Soldiers quoted human sayings before battle, finding strength in their raw defiance. Even artists began painting murals of humans standing tall against the council, symbols of resistance in a galaxy tired of submission. But not everyone was inspired. Among the older empires, fear spread like wildfire. The humans weren't just a nuisance, they were contagious. Their ideas, their attitude, their refusal to respect the old ways was spreading faster than any fleet could move. Entire populations were beginning to question the system. In one infamous council session, a Varn admiral confronted a human representative directly. "Do you not understand that your recklessness destabilizes the galaxy?" The human leaned forward, eyes cold but amused. "No, we understand it perfectly. We just don't care." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in centuries, the council chamber trembled, not from violence, but from the raw power of words, because in that moment, everyone realized the truth. Humanity wasn't trying to fit into the galaxy. Humanity was forcing the galaxy to fit around them, and cultures that had stood unchanged for millennia now faced an impossible choice: cling to tradition, or be swept aside by the storm called humanity. The Council of Elders had grown desperate. Diplomatic rituals had failed. Tests of endurance had failed. Even cultural shaming had failed. Humanity wasn't bending, wasn't breaking, wasn't even hesitating. Their influence was spreading like wildfire, igniting rebellion in places where order had once reigned. The Council made a fateful choice. If words could not tame the humans, then firepower would. The official story was simple: a training exercise, a routine skirmish, nothing more than a demonstration meant to remind the newcomers of their place. The galaxy had always kept order this way. Overwhelming force deployed against a defiant race until it surrendered. No one had ever resisted for long, and so the stage was set. A coalition fleet of 3 empires gathered on the fringes of neutral space, bristling with weapons that could tear moons apart. Against them, humanity deployed what few ships they had: crude, underpowered vessels patched together with stubbornness and duct tape. To galactic tacticians, it was a massacre waiting to happen. The battle began with warnings. The coalition demanded surrender. The humans replied with laughter. "You want us to back down? You'll have to make us." It was the last straw. The first salvos of plasma fire cut through the void, lighting up human hulls with blazing energy. Sensors across the galaxy tuned in, certain they were about to witness the end of Earth's arrogance. But what happened next was chaos. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't cower. They charged. Their ships dove headfirst into the storm, weaving unpredictably through enemy fire. Where other species fought with precision, humans fought with madness, slinging asteroids into enemy lines, overloading their own engines for bursts of suicidal speed, even ramming enemy cruisers head-on. Alien admirals panicked. Their formations crumbled. Their carefully orchestrated strategies meant nothing against enemies who refused to play by the rules. And inside those ships, the comms were filled not with fear, but with laughter. Soldiers shouted jokes over the roar of battle. Pilots sang songs as they dodged incoming fire. One recording captured a human commander yelling, "Let's give 'em hell, boys," before ramming his half-broken Corvette straight into a battleship's reactor core. The explosion lit up space like a second sun. By all logic, the humans should have lost. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically inferior. And yet, when the smoke cleared, the coalition had been forced to retreat, their fleet scattered, their pride shattered. Humanity hadn't won through strength of arms. They had won through sheer audacity, through a refusal to recognize the word impossible, through the kind of reckless courage that no war doctrine could account for. The aftermath was worse for the Council than the battle itself. Across the galaxy, oppressed colonies replayed the recordings of human defiance. Soldiers and rebels whispered new mottos before daring acts of rebellion. "Humans don't give a fire." The phrase was no longer a curiosity. It was a battle cry. In council chambers, voices rose in panic. If humanity's defiance spread unchecked, empires could collapse. Their carefully maintained order, their traditions, their authority, everything could unravel, and yet there was no denying the truth. The galaxy had seen countless wars, countless rebellions, countless species rise and fall. But never had it seen anything like this. Humanity wasn't fighting for conquest. They weren't fighting for territory. They were fighting because someone had dared to tell them to kneel, and humanity had only one answer to that command: laughter, defiance, and fire. The first battle was supposed to end the human problem. Instead, it gave birth to something far more dangerous: the legend of a species that refused to bow, and legends once born could not be killed. The galaxy had seen battles before. Empires clashed, fleets burned, and rebellions rose only to be crushed beneath overwhelming firepower. That was the rhythm of history. Everyone knew how it went. But the humans broke the rhythm. They should have been erased in their very first clash. The coalition had sent ships designed to intimidate entire sectors, weapons capable of silencing civilizations. And yet somehow the humans survived. Not just survived. They laughed, they fought, and they left the battlefield with stories instead of scars. The Council of Elders tried to spin the disaster. They called it an inconclusive engagement, downplayed the losses, and insisted the humans were reckless fools who'd gotten lucky. But no amount of propaganda could erase the recordings. Billions had seen them. Clips of human soldiers charging through plasma fire with grins on their faces. Pilots cracking jokes while their ships burned around them. Captains shouting, "We don't back down," as they rammed their enemies head-on. At first, people whispered in fear. They're insane. They don't care about death. But slowly, the whispers changed. They're fearless. They don't let anything stop them. What began as shock was becoming something the Council dreaded far more: respect. Among the frontier worlds, resistance fighters began painting human slogans across their bunkers. Smugglers carried human music across trade routes. Songs filled with defiance and fire that no alien culture had ever dared to sing. Soldiers on the edge of hopeless wars began repeating the words like a shield against despair. Humans don't give a fuck. And with every repetition, the legend grew. The Council scrambled to contain it. They outlawed human recordings, confiscated human technology, silenced anyone who spoke too highly of the newcomers. But the harder they tried to bury the legend, the brighter it burned. Because for those who had lived their entire lives in fear of authority, the humans represented something unthinkable: freedom. For centuries, fear had been the glue that held galactic order together. Fear of the Council, fear of war, fear of exile, fear of extinction. Entire species had learned to bow their heads and obey, because the alternative was unthinkable. But humans didn't bow. They didn't tremble. They stared death in the face, laughed, and kept walking forward. It was intoxicating. Even among the Council's own ranks, cracks began to show. Younger officers admired human resilience. Scientists were fascinated by their biology, their ability to endure toxins and radiation that should have killed them. Strategists grudgingly admitted that humans fought in ways no doctrine could predict. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, revolutions began to stir. A mining colony on the edge of Varn space refused to pay tribute, chanting human slogans as they tore down Council banners. A group of mercenaries deserted their contracts, claiming they would only fight alongside humans from now on. Even within the rigid Ketheri Empire, whispers spread among the lower castes. If the humans can defy the Council, why can't we? The Council called it dangerous. The people called it hope. The truth was clear. Humanity had started as an anomaly, a mistake, a problem to be solved. But now they were something else entirely. They had become a symbol of courage, of defiance, of the possibility that maybe the galaxy didn't have to live in fear forever. And though the elders would never admit it aloud, even they felt a shift in their hearts. When they looked at humanity now, they no longer saw reckless children. They saw equals, and for some, they saw leaders. The galaxy had feared humanity once, but now respect was blooming, uncontrollable, unstoppable. And respect once earned was far more dangerous than fear. The Council could no longer deny it. Their strategies had failed. Their propaganda had failed. Even their fleets had failed. Every attempt to crush humanity had only fueled the fire. The humans weren't shrinking into the shadows like so many others before them. They were standing taller, louder, and bolder with every blow, and worse, the galaxy was watching. Across 1,000 worlds, rebellions whispered the human creed. Soldiers decorated their armor with Earth's crude insignias. Children shouted defiant human slogans in the streets. Fear, once the greatest tool of control, was slipping through the Council's fingers. The elders gathered in secret chambers, their faces grim. Only one option remained: the galaxy's ultimate weapon. It had been forged long before humanity crawled out of their caves, an ancient fleet designed not to conquer, but to annihilate. Entire species had been erased by it, their names stricken from records, their stars left barren. It was the Council's last resort, a force so terrible that even mentioning it was considered taboo. But desperate times demanded desperate measures. They called it the Scourge. The plan was simple: unleash the Scourge on Earth itself. No colonies, no fleets, no scattered outposts. Strike at the heart of humanity and burn it to ash. Leave behind a warning so terrifying that no species would ever dare emulate them again. When the news leaked, because it always did, the galaxy held its breath. Some wept, certain that humanity's flame was about to be extinguished. Others clenched their fists, praying that somehow, impossibly, the humans would endure. And humanity? Humanity didn't flinch. On Earth, leaders convened in underground bunkers. Scientists worked day and night not to build weapons of equal strength. They didn't have that luxury, but to find ways to survive the impossible. Pilots volunteered for missions they knew they wouldn't return from. Entire populations braced themselves for the firestorm, but no one surrendered. No one begged for mercy. Instead, a single broadcast was sent across the stars. A human general stood before the cameras, battered and scarred from the last war, and spoke with fire in his eyes. You want to erase us? You want to turn our world into dust? Then come and try. We will not kneel. We will not bow. If you strike at Earth, you strike at the heart of freedom itself. And freedom fights back. The words echoed across the galaxy. Even as the Scourge fleet descended, blotting out the skies above Earth, resistance movements everywhere rose up in solidarity. Colonies rebelled, soldiers defected, entire systems erupted into chaos. Humanity was no longer fighting alone, because their courage had infected the stars. And then, the unthinkable happened. The first battle of the Scourge should have been the end. Yet against impossible odds, the humans refused to break. They threw everything they had into the fight: outdated ships, hacked-together weapons, suicidal maneuvers that made no tactical sense. And somehow, impossibly, they held the line. The Scourge lost ships. Not many, but enough to prove they weren't invincible. Enough to prove that humans could bleed their nightmares. For the Council, it was the beginning of a nightmare. For humanity, it was the spark of something greater. The turning point. No matter what came next, the galaxy knew one thing for certain: humanity would not be erased. They had fought the impossible and lived to tell the tale. And from that moment on, humanity wasn't just a species, they were a movement, a storm that could not be contained. The Scourge was supposed to be the end. Instead, it became the beginning. For the first time in recorded history, the Council's most terrible weapon had failed. Humanity hadn't destroyed it, not yet, but they had survived it. They had stood against annihilation and lived to tell the tale. And in the galaxy's collective memory, survival was sometimes louder than victory. The effect was immediate. On a mining world in the outer belt, workers who had lived under crushing taxes rose in open revolt, carrying human banners painted with crude symbols of Earth. On the war-torn plains of Dravath, insurgents who had been outnumbered 10-1 shouted human slogans as they ambushed their oppressors. Even within the glittering spires of Council-controlled worlds, whispers spread through the underclasses. If humans can fight the Scourge, what excuse do we have to remain afraid? The Council panicked. Every order they gave was questioned. Every demand was resisted. Entire fleets mutinied, their officers claiming allegiance not to the old powers, but to a new ideal. An ideal born of Earth's defiance. And humanity? Humanity rose. Their fleets grew not just from Earth's shipyards, but from defectors, rebels, and allies who poured in from across the stars. Species long thought too weak to stand now flocked to the human cause, eager to be part of the rising storm. Engineers from alien worlds joined human crews, welding together ships from scraps of scavenged technology. Strategists from oppressed nations offered their expertise, blending ancient tactics with human chaos. It was messy. It was uncoordinated. It was utterly insane. And it worked. Where the Council brought precision, the humans brought unpredictability. Where the Council relied on fear, the humans inspired courage. Every battle became less about territory and more about symbolism. When a ragtag human fleet liberated a single asteroid colony, the story spread like wildfire, proof that no place was too small to fight for. No people too powerless to matter. The galaxy began to shift. Markets collapsed as traders sided with humans and boycotted Council trade routes. Armies once loyal to the Elders now fractured, refusing to fight against the human-led coalition. Entire systems declared independence, citing Earth's defiance as their justification. But the most dangerous shift wasn't military or political. It was cultural. Human songs of rebellion became anthems across alien taverns. Human stories of sacrifice turned into legends retold on worlds they had never visited. Children of alien races began playing games where they pretended to be human soldiers, laughing as they charged the impossible. The legend of humanity had outgrown humanity itself, and at the center of it all, the humans didn't act like conquerors. They didn't demand submission. They didn't seek thrones or crowns. Instead, they offered something far more radical: choice. Stand with us or don't, they said. Fight if you want to. Live free if you don't, but never kneel again. The simplicity of it cut through centuries of fear. For countless beings, it was the first time anyone had given them permission to choose their own fate. The Council called it chaos. The galaxy called it freedom. From the ashes of oppression, a new order was being born, not ruled by humans but inspired by them. For the first time, the great empires of the galaxy weren't the center of history. Humanity was. And the elders realized something far worse than defeat was happening. They weren't just losing battles. They were losing the future, because the galaxy no longer looked to them for guidance. It looked to Earth. The galaxy was no longer the same. What began as whispers in back alleys had grown into shouts that echoed across the stars. Entire empires trembled not because of human weapons but because of human will. The Council tried one last time to regain control. They summoned their fleets, reinforced their armies, and issued decrees threatening every world that dared to defy them. Once, such words had been enough to crush resistance, but now, no one listened. The galaxy had tasted something it could never give up again: freedom. Humanity hadn't conquered it with force of arms. They hadn't imposed their rule. They hadn't demanded loyalty through fear. Instead, they had shown a different path, messy, reckless, and terrifying, but undeniably alive. On Earth, the skies still bore scars from the battles against the Scourge. Cities lay in ruins, fields burned, oceans scarred. Yet the people did not despair. They rebuilt with calloused hands and stubborn determination, singing the same defiant songs that had carried them through war. And across the stars, others followed their example. Worlds that had once cowered under the Council's shadow now flew banners of their own. Species long divided by fear now stood side by side. The legend of humanity had grown larger than humanity itself, an idea, unstoppable and eternal. The Council fell, not with a final battle, but with a whimper. Its fleet scattered, its leaders abandoned by those they had once ruled. Power drained away, replaced by something the galaxy had not known in living memory: choice. And at the heart of this new dawn stood humanity. Not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as proof. Proof that fear could be broken, proof that even the weakest could rise, proof that freedom was worth any cost. For centuries to come, children of countless worlds would grow up hearing the same stories: the laughter of human soldiers in the face of death, the reckless courage of pilots who fought impossible odds, the defiant words of leaders who refused to kneel. And in every retelling, one phrase would return, simple and unshakable: humans don't give a fuck. Not as profanity, not as arrogance, but as truth, because when the galaxy tried to make them kneel, humanity chose to rise. When the galaxy tried to erase them, humanity became immortal. And when the galaxy asked for submission, humanity gave it only one answer: laughter. The dawn had come. And the galaxy would never be the same again. And so the story ends where it began, on a fragile little world called Earth. A world that the galaxy underestimated. A people that no empire could bend. A legend that no fleet could kill. But here's the truth. This isn't just a story about humans in the stars. This is a story about us, about you, about me, about everyone who has ever been told to stay small, to bow down, to obey without question. Because the spirit that carried humanity through impossible battles isn't trapped in fiction. It's alive in every act of courage, every refusal to give in, every laugh in the face of fear. So the question is simple: what will you do with that spirit? Will you kneel when the world tells you to? Or will you rise and fight for something bigger than yourself? Will you live in fear, or will you choose freedom, even when it's messy, dangerous, and uncertain? The galaxy of our story was changed forever, because a single species refused to surrender. Imagine what could happen here in our world if more of us did the same. If this journey inspired you, if it lit that spark inside you, don't let it fade. Share this story, spread the legend, and carry that human spirit with you wherever you go, because legends are not born in silence. They're born when ordinary people stand up and say, "We don't give up. We don't give in. We don't kneel. The dawn is here. The choice is yours." What side of history will you stand on?